So panel, listen up, man. Since the minute Justin Gaethje's head bounced off that octagon floor over there at UFC 300, I haven't even seen or heard not one MMA fan that's not pushing for Topuria versus Holloway. Am I off here? I mean, have you guys felt the same around you guys? Volkanovski, the rematch. This all reminds me of the time that Cousin Harold in the movie Menace to Society was left on the floors of the streets of LA, and his crew said, nah, we're gonna have to do that shit another time. I mean, everyone's dismissing that fight, and they're all about this one. Are you guys surprised at the way this thing has kind of taken off there? This has a lot of heat. Goes, what's your thoughts here?
Well, the heat is like a little different for me because I wasn't expecting that. Max Holloway has never really needed to prove anything to anyone. He's been a badass for so long. So it's fun to actually have somebody on the other side of him that's actually trying to poke him a little bit. And it's actually working. I kind of like it. Look, if you look at all of his foes in the past, right? Like Volkanovski, he's always given him his respect. All these guys Max Holloway's done so much that there's really not much you could say negative about the guy. So to have somebody there kind of saying, look, I think I can do this, I can do that. You have to play this game to come towards me. That's just different. It's a little refreshing, Topuria, that guy's just a different beast, man. I really want to see this fight. I don't want to see 155 yet. To me, this makes a lot of sense. He's different, he's cut from a different cloth, and he has different types of attacks that I think can make this fight really, really interesting. And Max Holloway has shown that, yes, he can point to the center of the cage and get somebody to throw down, but he can also stick to a game plan too, So I really, really like this fight. The more and more I think about it and play the scenarios out in my head, the more excited I get, man. But I can't wait, dude. That speed that Topuria brings to the game, the ability to maybe take this to the floor, and then Max Holloway just seems like he's got this new fresh breath of life in him, right? He was a guy that was in no man's land not too long ago, and here he is at the top again. People talking about him, people saying they don't even want to fight him, they don't even want to be in the same elevator as this guy. This is an amazing fight. It has to happen.
Dan Tom, bro, as a fellow Hawaiian and someone who actually picked Holloway, not many people did, but I caught Protect Your Neck the day before, and I heard those predictions. I heard around 5 in there, so I know you're going to be spending some of that loot maybe. But anyway, what are your thoughts, man? Are you surprised the way this thing has taken off, man? A lot of good heat, healthy heat, like competitive heat. Like, no one's trashing each other's mother or anything, but I think we're all in, right? Are you?
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty straightforward, and I feel like it tests the UFC's kind of old model, which is crazy to say that, especially after something like UFC 300 just delivered, right? I don't want to end up on a Dana White highlight reel or anything, but it's kind of crazy to say that the old way is essentially Dana White giving the fans what they want to see. Remember that, guys? Remember the old Dana White vlogs, from whether it was ticket giveaways and to the matchmaking itself within the promotion. And this is one of those things where the MMA gravity, not even just the fandom, just the whole MMA, sphere, the whole MMA space, if you will, kind of zeroed in. Like George so beautifully set this up, right? As soon as Gaethje's head hit the canvas, hope he's doing well. But yeah, as soon as that happened, the whole world was focused on Topuria's reaction, what was coming out of Topuria's mouth. And, I don't have to preach to the choir, especially as far as, who I've got here, Danny, George, and Goes, as far as, the soccer or football, España presence, and to see how Topuria is already exploding on that radar. Now he's going to ingratiate himself to Western fans with some trash talk to help build this up. Yeah, I think to what you guys are saying, the only question is it for a BMF to not disrupt the title with, Volkanovski and perhaps others in the wing at 145, or is this the perfect setup for Max to go down? I think for Max going down, it's better for his legacy, but for Max going back down, perhaps that could also be better for Topuria. So there's some interesting trade-offs here.
Yeah, the BMF part of it really makes things interesting. We'll definitely get to that in just a second. But Danny, I want to get your reaction. You've been all about this as well, covering the sport for a long time. I like what Dan says. It kind of does take us back to what the fans want and not necessarily what the business needs. But how are you feeling about all the way this thing's kind of been cooked up?
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked by the way things have played out, because UFC 300 was massive. I didn't know that Max Holloway was going to steal the show. unlike Dan, I had him I thought he was gonna get badly hurt against Justin Gaethje, and all of a sudden, after UFC 300, such a massive event, then we go through a week without a UFC event, and then now a smaller one this upcoming Saturday. Some of the biggest talk around this is around MMA in general is just Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria. I thought there would be a possibility that Holloway could kind of insert himself there with a win, but saw it unlikely, but didn't think it was gonna take the life that it's taken. I always thought, hey, the front runner for that is always going to be Volkanovski, such a dominant champion. The biggest fight for Ilia Topuria still, in my opinion, or at least that's what I thought back then. He's done enough. He deserves the immediate rematch. And all of a sudden, I'm not even thinking about Volkanovski anymore, and I'm only thinking about these two fighting. So I'm surprised with the way it has played out, and I'm surprised with the type of interest that it's gathered in the last few weeks. This could really become a big grudge match, and who knows, maybe even a big rivalry, depending on how the results play out. So we'll see, but definitely intrigued with what's brewing here.
That's how huge of a moment it was for Max to point to the center of the octagon and get down the way he did with a comfortable lead, by the way. He was already on his way to victory, but that he put himself out there, and this moment has been so huge that here we are 10 days later, 9 days later, still talking about it. But goes, Max has options, right? Is this the fight to make slam dunk? Like, let's move on? Or, there's something about this whole champ thing, legacy stuff, right? He's been the champ at featherweight, and he's defended it at featherweight multiple times. So could he just wait for the winner of Poirier and Islam and just chill, right? And fight there? Or do you pointing towards Topuria no matter what?
Well, I don't even think that option is just like right there on the table waiting for him. So many things happen in the UFC. To me, look, it makes the most sense. Do this at 145, man. Go down there, take this fight. If you win, great. There's a new story for you to build off of. If you lose, hey, look, it's a wrap on 145, and you can rebuild your career at 155. You took out one of the best 155ers in the world, so we all know that you're capable of doing great things at 155. And you just kind of build towards that, I think, if you were to lose that fight. But when we're talking about, goats of different divisions and legacy and all that, this might be a moment where Max Holloway can kind of gain a little bit of ground that he may have lost to Volkanovski, right? If you can beat the guy that just beat the guy that beat you, then you start having these little round robin type discussions that we get sometimes with fighters, where certain fighters have beat others. And I think maybe that kind of brings a little bit of new life to Max Holloway's legacy. Again, he wins the belt. You can build off of that. I think it's worth going down there and trying that. And if you lose, you can always rebuild your career at 155. So for me, I think 145 makes the most sense right now.
I think I would agree with that, goes. And guys, look, like I mentioned, heat, right? Competitive, healthy heat is what's kind of been out there. I'm not talking about the NBA team that got squashed by 20 points yesterday at the Boston Garden. I'm talking about the tension between Topuria and Holloway. Well, here's a piece of that, all right, via social media. And this comes from Ilia Topuria, the featherweight champion in the UFC. Check it out, guys. He says, the only thing questionable about me is whether I finish you by KO or submission. I like it. I just beat the guy that beat you not once, not twice, but 3 times. Now you have one thing that keeps you relevant, and that would grant you a money fight. The BMF belt like Dan Tom mentioned earlier. I no longer fight for money, but for legacy. Winning that belt while holding my title will cement me as the first to hold both belts, the first to knock out Volk, and what most recently will happen when we fight. What will most certainly happen when we fight. The first one to put you to sleep, he also adds. Something to calm you down is this. God doesn't shame anyone. You will have a worthy defeat against the champion who will be remembered for eternity. I decide who, when, and where. And get this, guys. He says, he finishes strong. I like this tweet. If you don't like the terms, I'm sure Ortega will oblige. And of course, we all know Ortega took out Yair Rodriguez in Mexico recently. So is this BMF request fair? Danny, let's go to you. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I'm not a fan of the BMF belt. I've trashed it multiple times here. I thought it was an exclusive thing for Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal. It seemed fitting. But now, I mean, we're seeing not only that it came back, but it's being defended. And these are the type of problems that the the BMF belt brings. Like, yes, sure, it's exciting to have another new belt. Like, it certainly added another wrinkle to UFC 300. But what is the meaning of all this, right? Like, can it, if Max Holloway fights Ilia Topuria next, which is very likely, is that in play? Or like, what are the requirements? Because look, Ilia Topuria is a bad motherfucker. I'll say that. And I would say that most people in the UFC are as well. So it's like the qualifications to compete for it. You know, most people meet him in the UFC. Most people are badasses. So, yeah, I don't know. I think from Topuria's standpoint, it makes all the sense in the world. Like, the BMF belt clearly has picked up a lot of interest. So if he can be both undisputed UFC champion and the BMF of the promotion, that is huge. Also, first person who ever knock out Max Holloway, I mean, that'd be huge for him as well, if obviously he gets that done. So I think his request is fair. He is the champion. He can call his shots a little bit. But I just don't like the existence of this BMF belt. But yes, it's fair. It's completely fair. And I actually love it. I actually love that Topuria is got this little fire underneath him and is angling for big things and for legacy. Sure, the money's nice to him, but he wants to be the greatest of all time at 145. And look, at just 26 years of old, 26 years of age, you can't really discard that idea that he may go on a run and do something great. So I like it. I like the attitude. I don't like the BMF belt's existence.
Dan, Tom,
Guys,
you want to weigh in?
guys, I want to weigh in definitely because I just got Dana White's new highlight idea sent to me. Danny Segura never believed in the BMF belt. That's how it's going to start. MMA is going to be a black and white shot of Danny on this show. But at the risk of being put on that very same highlight video, I actually echoed Danny's sentiments, and we'll just add in for the sake of the BMF conversation whilst we're on it. I heard a lot of people that were in favor of it or just talking about it in general, justifying it as a way for non-champions to get belts. So opening the door to this Topuria matchup, as much as it makes sense, you know, does that, you know, kind of take away from anything, you know, anything if you were putting anything, assuming into the BMF belt? And you got to assume that as much as that could get absorbed into a championship, maybe the UFC would prefer that if they're attaching points to this belt. You know, maybe get this belt in the hands of a champion. That's one less points we got to pay out. We can get two birds with one stone if Topuria owns that belt. That's one less points payout for us. You know, they're always thinking about that budget. So yeah, interesting stuff.
It's so confusing, you guys. Like, honestly, I get why people like it, and it's kind of cool to see some of these people, like see Mark Coleman come out and put the belt, The Rock, all that stuff, all the eyes that come on it. And I think it does bridge a little bit of maybe that pro wrestling gap where you know, they have similar belts like that. But at the end of the day, like, I'm not even sure the UFC knows what they're doing with this thing, and that's what makes it so confusing. It's like, okay,
it's handy for them.
Yeah, it is. But look, if it goes into the hand of a champion, like, I just think at that point, you just get rid of it and it goes back into circulation and you pick two more people.
Not a bad idea.
Because the thing is, like Danny said, I think on the last episode, you can't just have anybody hold that belt. There's a certain swag that you have to carry to kind of even be considered in that type of a fight. Because at the end of the day, every division has a top dog. We already know who the top dog is. So why should that person be the BMF as well? Like, they already kind of are the BMF of that division. They have the belt. That's what that means, right? So for them to have two belts that kind of mean the same thing, I really don't get that. I'd say if a champion ever fights for it, they get the belt, that's fine. But then it just kind of goes back into circulation. Pick two more people that are deserving. Because what is this belt going to live in featherweight for the rest of its life? Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? Pick two people who have swag, do it again, run it again. But I don't hate Topuria for requesting that. That makes a lot of sense. I would do that. But at the end of the day, you're gonna have a guy with two belts. What happens the next time he fights? Which one's on the line? Can you actually lose one and keep the other? It's so confusing. Like, none of that makes sense.
George, I'm gonna take your spot here as host for a second, and I want to ask you guys this: what odds would you give that a UFC champion, undisputed champion, at one point in time will also hold a BMF belt? Because so far, the significance of it is. Right, we got these championship fights, and then we got these sort of bad motherfuckers fighting, right? Like, it's been kind of separate, but why can't it merge, right? Like, if Holloway and Topuria fight, you guys see a world where an undisputed champion also holds the BMF belt?
I do, because I won't put anything past this company. And right now, it looks like Topuria is going about it the right way. He's kind of poking the guy, right? Holloway tried to tell him, man, that's not BMF-esque what you're doing, especially coming off the heels of what some are calling the greatest knockout ever or the most spectacular knockout ever. Who knows? So, but I don't put it past the UFC, but I kind of like Goz's idea of if you got it, cool. But now we're gonna go maybe towards the middleweight division or the welterweight division or maybe even the heavyweight division. How are they not the baddest motherfuckers if you think about it? But and just give it some new life. I've never minded it. I didn't want them to force it on us, but I felt like the 3 matchups had that element. And I think you have to earn it over time, being a badass with the fights that you've had. So far I've been okay with it. I don't know. I don't know what the other guys think. What do you guys think?
I agree. I mean, I could see it happening totally. But at the same time, if we were sticking by this, then this belt should be open for the Masvidals of the world. I'll even throw guys like the Jim Millers of the world, like a way to pay off those kind of gritty war veterans who are never really going to get there, but they're in action fights. Yeah. I can kind of get behind it there. I'm not a big fan of the BMF belt. Again, kind of more like Danny. But at the same time, if we're going to stick to that premise and it's a chance for other people to get some extra money, whether it's point earnings, a belt, accolades, all these things that we're always like, oh, if only this guy could get a title shot, or if only they gave bonuses to the lower guys in the cards, not just the champs who are already getting paid. We always have that complaint, right? If we use it as a tool to give to that, deserved middle tier, working class tier, then by all means keep it around.
Yeah, I thought it would have been perfect for Lawler, but Lawler got to an undisputed title. But I always thought Robbie Lawler was a BMF. Diego gave us some great fights over the year. Matt Brown gave us some great gritty fights over the year. These really do look. They have that look, and they fight in a way where you're like, oh, I'm going down another alley. I just saw Matt Brown. Right. He looks pissed. So we'll see. Keep it in circulation. Just don't force feed it on us. Which I think, by the way. Not that we're gonna. Well, never mind. Yeah, I don't even want to get into the whole Dana White video thing, but I do want to ask something. Yeah, go ahead.
Doesn't the BMF, to you guys? I don't know if it means the same thing to you guys, but to me, what it means is you can take the champion from any division, right? That means they're the best at that weight class. But if I'm walking into the bar and I'm gonna get in a bar fight, I don't always want that guy with me, right? I don't want John Jones with me in a bar fight. I'll take Derek Lewis though. You know what I mean? I don't want Leon Edwards with me, but I'll take Jorge Masvidal in a street fight. That's what the BMF means to me. Just somebody a little bit out of that fold. That's a little crazy. He's got a little swag to him. To me, I don't know, some of these guys, if they were to hold that belt, it would lose the significance of it for me.
Yeah, I agree. Dan, let me ask you this question.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm coming to you here anyway, but whatever you want to add to it. Do you think Topuria was even out of line? I mean, this is a legend we're talking about, right? In Holloway, who's kind of conducted himself with a lot of class. We just saw in that B-roll how he's raising Arnold Allen's hand when he defeated him. He had so much grace and respect for the Korean zombie. He's taken his 3 L's against Volk, like a champ, as terrible as that sounds, but you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Even Aldo, he still praises Aldo. So what do you think, about Topuria's kind of the angle that he's taken in all this?
I mean, you guys know me. I'm not the biggest fan of it. And when I kind of said earlier, ingratiate himself to more Western fans, because that's just kind of what our culture seems to be about, not to sound like gray hair boomer, as I'm getting grays coming in, but the whole TikTok and the whole online generation of just, even just, Twitter, kind of changing and it's all about dunking on somebody and, I'm the best, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the influencer status. So it's really all in line. It's only going to help him. So I can't talk crap about his crap talk, because that is a way to gain traction. However, even if you don't have my sensibilities, which I don't blame you, I'm not telling you to have my sensibilities, by the way, I do feel like it stands out kind of oddly. Because like you mentioned, George, this is, my always go-to was Glover Teixeira. When you talk about the best sportsman in the octagon or in MMA, like Glover Teixeira, he was waking his opponents up, making sure they're okay. I'll forgive a bad loser way faster than I'll ever forgive a bad winner. I hate bad winners. And Max Holloway is not a bad winner. He is all class, and he is giving Glover Teixeira a run for his money when you consider just the most sportiest, classiest dudes. Like George was saying, you can't really think of a time where Max, whether he's winning like Arnold Allen or even losing like Volkanovski, putting a real genuine hey fans, give credit to Volk. He's the new champ, yada yada. So it really kind of rings not false because it's not false, but it does ring kind of sour what Topuria perhaps is doing than normally it would. I think this is the normal approach, but against a guy like Max, it's kind of like, all right. I mean, I don't know what you're barking at there, but okay.
I love Dan Tom, but I couldn't disagree anymore. I think this is perfect. Look, I thought I knew Max Holloway going into UFC 300, right? For the longest time, he's the second best featherweight behind Volkanovski, fan-friendly style, this and that. But after UFC 300, he completely redefined my sort of definition of him. And all of a sudden, now I'm wondering, like, okay, what can he really do? I thought he was just going to be in no man's land and this was going to be the rest of his career. Hell no. He's got another wind in this. He can achieve great stuff. And I loved seeing that new aspect of Holloway. And now I'm loving even more seeing this sort of salty, sour, pissed Max Holloway coming after Ilia Topuria. And look, I love a good trash talk so long religion, race, and all these and family doesn't get involved. And I think that's a sweet spot where this trash talk so far has landed on. It's all about legacy. It's all about who's the best. It's all about who's the baddest. And I couldn't be any more excited. I was excited already for the style clash because it's a fantastic fight. But if you add that little bit of edge, oh, I'm all in. And I'm loving seeing this side of Max Holloway because he's a nice guy. But and I kind of teased him a little bit like he shouldn't be fighting for the BMF belt. He was just at the Boys and Girls Club. But that made all change once he gets going. He's got that Hawaiian blood. Dan Tom knows about that. So I'm sure, you know, when push comes to shove, maybe we'll see a different side of him that will keep furthering this sort of new discovery of Max Holloway, this new chapter. So I'm all in. I'm super excited for this.
All right, Dan, let's make this quick. I know you got hours of footage to pour through before this fight's even made, and if it is, the matchup. But just when you hear the two names, I know you got an encyclopedia of who's a southpaw, who does this, who's got cardio. But what right away, just do you have an early lean on that fight? And I know even though you are Hawaiian and you did peck Holloway in the last one, you're always unbiased. So what are you leaning towards early here?
Yeah, I did pick Volkanovski in fights 2 and 3. That's the only times I think I picked against Max, but there's a bias that I have to fight there, admittedly. And even though I do reserve my picks for fight day, I'll say this. I don't know if you have odds. I know you're an odds guy, George. I'm sure they already have odds up on the match, even if they're fantasy odds, right? But I would imagine that either it's going to be tight odds no matter what. It shouldn't be wide odds. But I imagine that if Topuria is not opened as the favored, that public money will push him to a slight favorite, and that's where it will close. Will that be where my pick goes? I'm not necessarily sure. Against the Max that we've seen, his durability. For me, my early lean is actually toward Max, but like I kind of hinted toward earlier, I think he looked so much better in so many ways, like Danny said at 155. But as far as the tactics, what was there, his foundation, his build, his performance goes, I think he could be a better performer at 55. And even though he has got a lot of miles, he is 32. And when you get to that 31, 32 age, that's when I don't like seeing guys killing themselves for those lighter weight classes like 45, 35, or 25. So there's a little bit of worry if he goes back down to 45 in my mind, but my lean is Max.